All around me are familiar faces. No expression, no expression. And I find it kinda funny, find it kinda sad. I find it hard to tell you, it's a very, very bad world. Bad world.
Look, I found it so crackingly funny last time, of course I will reuse the same joke for the sequel that has even more weird faces. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets had 5 direct game adaptations released in 2002, and in this particular video we're taking a look at the version for the first PlayStation developed by Argonaut Games. It is directly based on the previous Philosopher's Stone game, so if you haven't already, please watch the review for that one first, as we'll reference it quite a lot in this video to save time. Link is in the description and YouTube cards. As always, we'll dissect this retelling of the story where Harry, Hermione and Ron investigate the attacks on Muggle-born children while uncovering the mystery behind the Chamber of Secrets with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system, starting with the design category. This is the most important part of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, 4. The way a game is structured and built is what influences our experience the most. Like the PC version of Chamber of Secrets had been an improvement over the original PC Philosopher's Stone game, so is this PlayStation 1 version of the game an improvement over the original PlayStation Philosopher's Stone pretty much in every way. It's still a game focused very much on platforming more so than spellcasting, although the importance of the latter has been greatly increased. There are far more situations that require you to levitate objects using Wingardium Leviosa, and even some explorable areas in Hogwarts are not passable until you learn the Verdimillious Duo spell, which by the way is actually needed very frequently throughout Chamber of Secrets, unlike the first game where that incantation outside the tutorial was used literally once. Though here in Chamber there is a new spell, Petrificus Totalus, that still repeats the same fate. It is used only a couple times in the same mission where you learn it, and that's it. In terms of level design, Chamber of Secrets follows the principles set out by Philosopher's Stone. It's a collection of nicely escalating challenges spread throughout pretty linear levels with some branching paths. For a simple example, there is a situation where you need to levitate a pot onto a pressure plate to open up the path forward. Then there is a moment where you have to fight a washing machine that chucks clothes at you. And later on you'll find a place where you have to fight a washing machine and, after defeating it, levitate it towards a pressure plate. It's pretty straightforward, but it works, and unlike Philosopher's Stone, which started falling apart in the second half of the game, Chamber of Secrets is consistent throughout. Levels are mostly linear, many times the choice in what path to take will just lead to a circle that connects you back to the main path anyway, although sometimes there are branches that can lead you to a secret area. And you'll find that these secret areas have become more elaborate, in many ways becoming middle levels themselves, some are pretty long. What is also good is that this time there is a proper moment that teaches how to find them in the walls. Chamber of Secrets will often put different minigames throughout your journey to vary things up, be it flying in a car away from Hogwarts train, getting rid of pixies in a store, or catching slugs that Ron vomits out. It is curious though that sometimes you can see moments where clearly content was cut. Like when the flying car saves us from spiders, this literally looks like a setup where we're gonna have another flying level with it, but get just a cutscene instead. And not only mechanically do these minigames work better, even those that are taken from the previous game, like the first-person shooting, where thanks to increased collision detection with objects, you don't have to be as precise with relatively floaty targeting, they control better as well. Though still there are some hiccups, like in the Gnome Throne minigame, the collision for some objects is actually too large, and that can mess up your throws. There is also more purpose added to things like running to classes under a certain time limit and going through their little rhythm minigames, as good performance will be rewarded with trophies. And like with Philosopher's Stone, you can find a number of wizard cards, but this time you're never blocked from finding one forever. There is a photo album in the Gryffindor common room that acts as a replay function that allows you to go through all levels you can't go back to anymore and get any wizard cards you might have missed there. It's a good thing too. There is actually one private lesson with Gilderoy Lockhart where you get a wizard card for an A grade, and the first time I didn't manage to reach it. Now, even though he says I can come back later, after this lesson we get an uninterruptible segment that leads us straight to the end of the game, so the only way to replay this lesson is actually through the photo album, where you can also see that the game literally doesn't have even text recorded for trying to revisit this particular spell lesson, as he mentions Petrificus Totalus instead of Erdemilius. Some wizard cards are purchased from Fred and George with beans that you collect throughout the levels. I must say, this is the part where I think Philosopher's Stone has handled things a bit better. There, collecting beans would reward you with secret areas that provided upgrades, an aspect that is absent here. Even for Quidditch, which, outside of some broomstick segments in the main campaign, is actually a totally separate side activity that you have to enter from the main menu. To be fair, there is a Flipendo upgrade you can get for collecting 500 beans, but it's out of the way and you never feel like you need it. However, collecting wizard cards does unlock access to special Founder House Champion duels, and dueling is another new minigame mechanic in Chamber of Secrets that you will see quite often. And while the concept is solid, you have your arena where you should flipendo at each other, but also, if you get the opponent to hit a special sparkling object, you can get a powered up spell. In the end, all these duels play largely the same despite the attempts to vary up the arenas. It is enough to just run back and forth while shooting, and to get a special spell you can just hide behind the object you want the opponent to hit, as it will block all damage. Still, works nice enough for the purposes of variety. Besides your standard jumping levels, you've got stealth segments that again are an improvement over the Philosopher's Stone ones. The detection distance doesn't feel unlimited this time, though failing still will lead you all the way back to the beginning of the whole section, which is annoying. There are sliding levels where, by the way, I think the control hint is wrong. X doesn't seem to speed up your movement. Becoming faster or slower is done through the D-pad up-down. There is your run towards the camera level, which is pretty funny, some nice little secrets. You often change up what you're doing in this game, which is really what makes Chamber of Secrets work. It's a longer adventure than Philosopher's Stone, it will take you about 6-7 hours, but it's still quite basic in its mechanics and level design. There are no interesting enemies to speak of, although the bosses are far better this time around. The levels and progression are fine and nicely done and indeed enjoyable, but nothing stands out, which can be applied to the whole game. Everything is nice, but nothing stands out. Which is why, should we open up all the scores for design, I will assign a 6 to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for PS1. The best way to describe it is that it's a PlayStation version of Philosopher's Stone done properly, thanks to the ability to make a second iteration on the same concept and mechanics, but also there is nothing that would elevate the game beyond a nice simple adventure. It lacks depth in mechanics, lacks depth in levels, lacks depth in exploration, lacks depth in everything that's there. I can't find any element that would make me go, yes, it does this part really well, which could lead to a higher score. But also, is it so bad to just have a nice, unassuming game? I would say no, there is nothing bad with that. Time to discuss context. This category has the weight of 1 as it's about things that enhance the experience rather than define it. Plot, motivation, character arcs, etc. Even though Chamber of Secrets is based on the movie of the same name, we'll dissect only how the game handles context on its own without the assumed knowledge from the source material. Though of course, this being the sequel, we also won't criticize assuming you have seen the first movie, especially considering that the PS1 version of Philosopher's Stone wasn't exactly successful in properly representing that part's narrative, although not the worst either. The Chamber of Secrets for PS1 handles this aspect much better, though there are still ways to improve, but I have a feeling that the number of weird missions that this game has is related to sections and dialogue lines getting cut due to lack of time. If we are to compare this with the PC version of Chamber of Secrets, for example, then it actually adapts more of the source material, not only from the movie but the books too, but also this version overall flows worse because some things either don't connect as well or are not represented properly. Some segments are too overly detailed and some just skim through different details, sometimes skipping them entirely. For example, the segment at the beginning of the game in the Burrow, the home of Ron Weasley's family, is pretty long. We are introduced to several important members of the family, including Ginny Weasley, though we won't see her again until the very end of the game, like it's the case with most Chamber of Secrets game adaptations. Searching for the Polyjuice Potion ingredients transforms into a pretty large quest. It's quite fitting for an adaptation. This subplot will make Harry go to Diagon Alley in the middle of Christmas to find some ingredients there, and that is a much better justification for having it in the middle of the game than the sudden trip we had to make in the PS1 Philosopher's Stone. What I like about this section though is that instead of Harry having to find all the ingredients, each of the three main characters has to find several of them, so you do actually get a sense of working as a team. Plus, these segments pretty naturally switch towards other important plot points. And after everybody learns that Harry is a parcel-moth, can talk with snakes, the game actually represents how shitty it can feel by adding some people that discuss this and how Harry might be a dark wizard, actually getting a bit into the themes of accepting those who are different.
Everyone's saying that Potter's the heir of Slytherin.
Potter's a parcel-mouth. Everyone knows that's the mark of a dark wizard.
And yes, I still argue that the author of the book this is based on could learn something from the themes she herself wrote about. But then there are a lot of situations which just don't quite make sense because the game didn't adapt all the details from the source material. For example, in the book, the purpose of the scene where Lockhart dresses up dwarves as cupids for Valentine's Day is ultimately so Harry would find out that the diary he found takes ink in, and that's why he starts communicating with it through writing. In the game, there is nothing that leads to this realization. Harry just decides to write in it, which is not a problem, but in this context, the whole segment with Cupid dwarfs comes out of nowhere and leads to nothing. The PC version of Chamber of Secrets had a pretty strange timeline where Ron and Harry were late to Hogwarts Express, even though everybody else was literally near them just 5 minutes ago. But in the PS1 version, there is never even a mention of them being late. So 1 minute the two are talking to Ginny, and the next they both are in a flying car searching for the Hogwarts train. The game at the end mentions how Hermione realized the monster is a basilisk, but actually never showed this moment in the story proper. Colin Creevey is set up quite a bit as a character, but when we see a petrified student getting put into the infirmary, we're never told that's him, like in the resolution. And then the whole thing with Harry freeing up Dobby does happen at the end, so there is a resolution, but it isn't set up. We're never told about the House of Rules. There are plenty of moments like that. This creates a weird situation where this retelling of Chamber of Secrets, despite being actually pretty detailed, manages to feel quite disjointed. This is why I should open up all scores for context. I will assign a 6. Overall, you will get what the story is about and it's enjoyable, but too many details are missing. Now let's talk about aesthetics. This is another category with the weight of 1, as it's again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, sounds, music, etc. Now, as this game is directly based on the Philosopher's Stone PS1 version, it retains a lot of its issues, like for example, all the faces. The ones that were created for this game specifically, sadly, aren't any better. And Hagrid, just because your face is now more often shown from another angle, doesn't make it any less of a meme. That said, there are also quite a lot of improvements when it comes to the design of environments. Hogwarts in Chamber of Secrets doesn't feel like a damp dungeon as much due to a larger amount of objects and colors. And there are quite beautiful locations, like a Hogwarts tower lit by a sunset, or Diagon Alley, which was taken from the previous game but redesigned with a Christmas theme. The result feels very magical, especially the music that accompanies it. Jeremy Soule is of course an absolutely horrible human being, but I can't deny that his music, which is used more often than in the previous PS1 games so it doesn't feel as dead, provides a magical atmosphere to the world. If we are to open up all the scores for aesthetics, I will assign a 6 to Chamber of Secrets. It is a definite improvement over the Philosopher's Stone game, though still sadly shares many of its issues. Let's move on to Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2, and it's all about how well the game connects all of its aspects together into a singular wholesome experience. Chamber of Secrets feels much more like a game based on the Harry Potter world than its PS1 predecessor. Not just thanks to better story representation, but also several curious details like showing Dobby charming different statues so Harry wouldn't be able to progress in his journey, which is very fitting. And yet there's still plenty of things that feel like they happen just because it's a game. For example, the whole notion of Hogwarts founder champions sitting and hiding behind portraits just waiting for somebody to challenge them after collecting enough wizard cards.
Well, 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 Harry Potter. So, you've made it this far. I am the Slytherin wizard dueling champion. You are courageous indeed to dare to come here. Come on. Let's duel!
But still, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets does enough thematically appropriate things that I will assign a 6 to it. The game doesn't feel like just a standard platformer with a Harry Potter skin, but rather like an actual Harry Potter game, and that's enough. Time for our final category, emotions. This is the most subjective category of Stasocritic, as it is all about personal feelings, and yet it has the second biggest weight, 3, because personal feelings matter a lot. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for PS1 might be a somewhat simplistic game. Mechanics are basic, levels are simple, duels despite attempts at variety lack any sort of depth, and yet I actually really enjoyed playing it, to the point that I 100%ed the game, found all wizard cards and completed all secret areas. I've mentioned in the design section that Chamber of Secrets really depends on levels varying up gameplay situations, otherwise it wouldn't work, but this variety was enough for me to be kept thoroughly engaged throughout this experience. It helps that, despite the game's issues, there are plenty of details that I really appreciate, like this funny moment of Lockhart and Ron sliding past us in the level where we descend into the Chamber of Secrets. This is why, out of all scores for emotions, I will assign a 9. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is not a deep title, but it's fun. Time to summarize everything. After all scores and their weights are taken into account, the PS1 version of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets gets a final Stasocritic rating of 65. It's a pretty nice game. It's not going to blow your mind or anything, but if you like Harry Potter, you might want to try it out. It is going to be an enjoyable ride. If you're searching for classic platformers to play, well, the choice is up to you, but I can certainly say that this game is nice enough that if you decide to play it, then you won't have any regrets.